Rebecca Lee Crumpler was the first ever female African American doctor.
The theme of this year's history fair is breaking barriers.
Rebecca Lee Crumpler was an influencer and could have helped the migration of African Americans to Chicago.
Over 600,000 men will die during the Civil War, many of which will die of medical or significant ignorance.
One unlikely African American woman, Rebecca Lee Crumpler, the mother of medicine, will change the course of medical and female history,
but still has not been truly recognized by history.
Rebecca Lee Crumpler changed the course of medical and female history. Rebecca Lee Crumpler was the first ever African American woman to get an MD degree. Crumpler grew up in Charleston, Massachusetts, and worked as a nurse.
In 1864, Rebecca Lee Crumpler married Arthur Crumpler. She pursued her career in Boston. Rebecca Lee Crumpler was in the first class at New England Medical School. There were only 12 women in her whole class.
In 1864, Rebecca was the only African American to graduate from medical school. Rebecca Lee Crumpler's book is called A Book of Medical Discourses in 2 parts, which was published in 1883. Her book was dedicated to nurses and mothers. She was influenced by homeopathy. She suggested recommendations for treating diseases without mentioning homeopathy. In her book, Crumpler describes the progression of experiences that led to her book and her practice of medicine. Her aunt provided care for sick people. Rebecca Lee Crumpler was the first ever African American woman to become a doctor. She was also the first African American to earn a Doctor of Medicine degree from the New England Female Medical College. Crumpler wrote one of the first books written by an African American talking about the medical history.
In 1989, Dr. Sandra Mass Robinson and Patricia established a club named Rebecca Lee Society. It was one of the first ever African American societies exclusively for women.
The society was to support and promote African American success in physics. Crumpler's home had been included on the Boston Women's Heritage Trail.
In conclusion, Rebecca Lee Crumpler was a strong, independent woman and helped change the rights of African Americans.
It did not matter your race. You can still do anything. Even though that Rebecca might have not been a civil rights activist, she still fought for what was right.
Rebecca Lee Crumpler was also in a time where Jim Crow laws were taking place.
Jim Crow laws were laws that helped African American rights, mainly for the South Side. Rebecca Lee Crumpler still worked with these laws, even though she lived up north.
Crumpler was not alive when Jim Crow laws took action. Jim Crow laws fought against segregated areas and public places. The laws worked towards equal rights.
Jim Crow was the name of a racial caste system. Pro-segregation politicians gave speeches on the danger of integration. Even children's games perceived black as inferior beings. All social institutions reflected and supported the oppression of blacks.
A black male could not shake hands with a white male because it was being socially equal. Blacks were not allowed to show affection to one another in public.
Jim Crow etiquette prescribed that blacks were introduced to whites, never whites to blacks.
Crumpler was raised in Pennsylvania by an aunt who provided care for sick people.
Historians wondered if Rebecca Lee Crumpler knew her status as the first female African American doctor. Also, she got a coin named after her.
Another fact is that during the 20th century, Dr. Rebecca Cole was believed to have the title as the first ever African American doctor.
Rebecca Lee Crumpler retired in 1883. In 1864, Rebecca married her second husband, Arthur Crumpler. Her husband and her were together until she died in 1895. She died of tuberculosis.
Rebecca Lee Crumpler got an inspiration to become a doctor by seeing how her aunt worked with sick patients, and she knew ever since she wanted to help people as a living.
Overall, Rebecca Lee Crumpler worked with the Jim Crow laws and fought for African American rights. She worked really hard for a degree in physics and has made history with it.